Hey, seniors, it is Tuesday the 25th, and let's take a look at what we got going on today. Today, we are going to shift gears into evaluating our sources. Yesterday, we did the thesis statement, and that's that one sentence statement of purpose that gives us the measuring stick or the guide, if you will, for what we are trying to accomplish, right? So now that we have that in place, and we're like, this is what I want to focus on, this is what I'm going to write about, this is the very narrow, focused topic. Now we can go back in and start looking at our sources, pick out the three best sources that we're going to use, and start the evaluation process. So today, the evaluating sources, we're going to talk a little bit first about why this is important. And if you think about sources, that when you are trying to convince your audience of something, you want to provide the best possible proof for them, right? You want to make sure that they really buy into what you're saying. And that starts with the evidence, the examples, the proof that you're using. If you are using sources that they don't trust, they're not going to believe the information, and therefore they're not going to believe you. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we really have a good handle on the sources so we know this is the best possible source. I think also too it's important to do this process because here you get the sense of what is this source really about. I know a lot of times we go find a source and we skim down till we find like a line that we want to use and you copy it and then you stop. You haven't looked anywhere else. You don't really know what the whole source is about, right? And sometimes they will bring in an opposing viewpoint. Maybe they start with a position, but then over the course of the rest of the article, they develop it into something slightly different. But you just got that piece at the beginning. You don't have the full context or the full understanding of that source. And that could lead to some confusion or maybe some misquotation. So that's what the process of evaluating the sources does. So if you go to today, you'll notice that this is a practice assignment. We're going to walk through this one together and do this one together. And um, this will get you set up to practice so that you can spend the rest of the week evaluating your other two sources. And that will be a learning check due on Friday. Okay. So today you're going to take the best possible source you have for the problem, the one source that you think is the best one that explains the problem for your paper. On the first line, you'll label it as problem because that's how you're going to use it. The title, the author, the date that was published, those are pretty straightforward. Okay. And if there's not an author, put no author listed. Okay. Now that's not a dead, like I can't use it because there is no author, but it does make you have to think about, okay, why was there no author listed? Now the publisher is not the author or it's not the web address. The publisher is who put that information out there, who created the space for it or paid for it or was sponsoring, if you will, promoting this information. Now, if you use the inspire.net site, it literally says publisher, right? It'll tell you right there who the publisher is. If you are using a website, like you did a Google search and you found something, you'll find the publisher in a couple different places. One, and probably the easiest one in most cases, is next to the copyright date. If you scroll to the bottom of the web page, at the bottom it'll say copyright, whatever date, and then somebody next to it, that's the publisher. Now, that's not a perfect system because in some places it'll just repeat the website or something like that. That won't help us necessarily. Or maybe it doesn't list an organization or a business or a sponsor or a publisher. So then you have to go to the About page and read through the About page to find out who actually owns that space. A copy of the website link and the MLA citation. This whole first page here, very straightforward. It's copy paste, right? You just copy it and you paste it and put it in. The next thing that I'm asking you to do is a summary. And this goes back to that idea that sometimes you use a source, but you don't really understand the full source. This kind of gets you to that point so that you're like, okay, I know what this is. I know what this is about. I know what they're trying to get to. So I'm asking for 2, 3, 4 sentences where you kind of summarize the article. How do you know how to do a summary is good? You know, you think about if you came in and said, hey, I read this article last night. And I said, really, what was it about? And you told me, that's the summary, right? And again, we've done this before. The rest of this then, under this orange banner, then asks you to really pick apart the source and to really think about the source and like how valid is this source? What do I know about the source that really helps me say this is one that I want to use in my paper? So we'll start with the idea of purpose. What was the author trying to do? And if you think about that, that's going to give you some clues as to why they picked the examples they did, or the word choice they did, or the approach they did, the organization. What were they trying to do? Is it an informative piece? Well, if it is informative, then it's probably going to be a lot more, objective. Maybe some of the terms are going to be a lot more clinical. They're not really taking a position, right? But if they're persuading you, then the examples are going to be skewed a little bit, or maybe there's a little bit of bias, or maybe because I want you to do something, I only give you some of this type of information. So we really want to think about what the purpose was. And again, we're going to answer it over here in a sentence or two. The audience, who was the intended audience? And again, this will help you understand why they used the examples that you did. If you think about who's the receiver of the message, are they going to understand this example or this example? Which one's going to make the most difference to them, right? And so if you think about who was this really written for? Credentials, what makes the author an expert? And this really gets to one of the key ideas as to why should I believe this source, right? What do I know about the author? Now, in the author, on a lot of these, there will be a link on Inspire. It could be on the detailed record, on a web page. It could be a link. It'll have the author's name and it'll say bio, or even just a hot link, and you click it, you go. You can find out something about them. Maybe you have to do a Google search to find out something about them. If you don't have an author, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad, but does the organization or the publisher provide some type of credentials? For instance, was it the American Red Cross or was it FEMA? And so, where does the credentials come from? What makes this expert, or what gives this some authority? The quality of the information, what makes you feel comfortable about this? This could be a lot of different things. For instance, did they use a lot of citations, or did they use references, or did they say where they got their information from? Those are some big keys, right? But also, too, does the information kind of fit what you understand? Is it a repeat of things that you've seen in other places? Is this information that's not so far out of the lane of everything else, right? Is it explained well? Does it make sense? Does it fit? All these kinds of things are what kind of makes you feel okay to use it. Currency and timeliness, when was this published? Okay. But also, too, think about, does that time fit with what you're trying to do? For instance, the example that I used the other day was like, if I was looking for the number of students who had tested positive in our school, I want the last state report that came out Monday. I don't want one from 2 years ago. That's not going to be very helpful, right? But what if I find an old source and it allows me to say, hey, here's what it was then, and then I can find a source from today and I can do that comparison, right? So what about the time? Does it help you see how it fits into what you're trying to do? I think also, too, when you think about currency and timeliness, if a website is up to date and people are taking time and adding new stuff to it and cleaning it up and keeping it kind of fresh, I think that also goes to show you a little bit like, hey, people are taking care of this site and it's valid information because people care about this information. And then finally, what bias does the author bring? What is their stance, and does that impact or change the way that the message is presented? Um, Guys, I think that this process of evaluation, I know that you're going to, when you look at the first part especially, you're like, why? Really, this makes you do the thinking, okay? And that's what I really want. Because a lot of times if I say, is this a credible source? You'll say, yeah. But you can't tell me why. And so the process of this evaluation is to give you the tools to be able to explain how and why it is. Okay? So please take the time to do this. Today, you're going to do the one best source that you have that describes the problem that you're writing about. Good luck. Make sure you're reaching out to Miss McGuire if you have any questions.